Hello, I'm Foulplay Gaming and welcome to another deck building video in the card game Achroma. Today's video, we are building a deck which is called Astrid's Objective for Power, which if you wait until you see some of the cards in this deck, you'll see why that name is pretty clever. I'm sure Fungar would approve. Just like all of my deck building videos, the timestamps will be down below if you want to skip to a particular part in the video. If you want to see this deck being used live, then make sure to come to my streams Sundays at 6 PM. As with any video, a like, comment and subscribe would do me absolute wonders. And if you fancy picking up your own Achroma cards today, whether it's to do this deck build or to go for a different realm, then check out the link in the description down below where you can get 10% off your entire order today. Alright, so let's take a look at the deck, Astrid's Objective for Power. So to start with, what cards will you need to build this deck? So you are going to need the entire of the Warriors of Wishwell realm in the card game Achroma. You do not need the promo card, but you will need the entire realm, as there are cards from all of the different factions built into this deck. When deck building, I always like to tell you what the main objective of this deck will be. A Achroma deck is a deck which has the objective of trying to raise up to 30 shards. An Achroma deck is where we look to try and erase all of our opponents by reducing them to 0, and a hybrid is a mixture of the two. This deck I would consider a Achroma deck. You are going to be winning by trying to gain to 30, not by removing everybody else down to 0. For those of you that just want to build this deck and give it a go, on screen now is a list of all the cards you need, as well as obviously the picture. If you want to, you can pause the video now and go and build this deck for yourself and give it a go. Alternatively, if you want to see the positives and negatives of this deck, as well as all of the different combos that you should be looking to do with this deck, then watch on to see how this deck should be played. So let's take a deep dive into how you should be actually playing this deck and using some of the cards to combo against each other. Let's start with the legendary Astrid. She's a really cool legendary, and having Shield Wall 2 is really useful, which we'll discuss shortly. But the main part of her ability, which is important for this build, is the +2 for each Holder Troll on your canvas. Now, I've built this deck with a total of 10 Holder Trolls, although admittedly the maximum you can have out at a time due to a couple of them being heroic characters is 8. That means there is a massive opportunity for shard gain. Although it is quite unlikely, if you were to have 8 of your Holder Trolls out with Astrid, you're going to be gaining 16 shards just from Astrid alone. You're probably going to win on that turn. Therefore, it's quite important that you try not to deploy Astrid first. Try and wait until you have at least 2 or 3 other Holder Trolls out on your canvas before playing Astrid, so at least you get good value out of Astrid on one turn before she could potentially be removed. Another one of these Holder Trolls is a rare called Civ of Lacringi. She is a great character to have out, although as you can see, her ability is X equals how many shield wall you have. So to try and get the best out of her ability, try to only have her out on your canvas when you can also have 1 or 2 of the other shield wall cards in this deck, which is only Astrid and 2 of your Lacringi Shield Maidens. So try to combo Civ with one of these cards so at least you can get a little bit more out of her. Objects of Power. This deck has the maximum amount of objects for a Warriors of Wishwell deck. Thorstein's Gauntlet is easily your best one, giving you a +1 for each character and location on your canvas. Plus, it can only be erased when the character it's attached to is erased, which is incredibly strong. So you want to make sure that you only put this on a character that has at least 4 shard cost for its best use. If you end up putting it onto a character that only has 2 shards, it's going to be much easier for your opponent to wipe it out. Don't waste your Lacringi Catapults. Its ability is some of your only control in this deck. Try not to play it unless you can use its ability to erase a card, otherwise hold on to it. All of the other objects you see here, you can use as you see fit and are relatively self-explanatory. As for the other characters in this deck, as you can see, all of your other characters are here to help you with your objects of power. So Lacringi Miner is here to help you play your objects cheaper. If you technically have both of him out at the same time, then all but 2 of your objects of power can be played for free, which is pretty strong. So ideally, try to get 1 or 2 of him out on the board before you start offloading your objects. Eric is a brilliant character, as when played he allows you to dig and find for an object. I suggest you wait to play him until you've already got an object in your dregs for the best value. For example, if you can wait until you've got a Lacringi Catapult in your dregs, you could play Eric, dig for the object, then play it again to reuse its effect of Drain 2. Also, try and save at least one of your Erics specifically to dig for Thorstein's Gauntlet again, as that's one of your strongest objects of power. Magnus has also got a couple of copies in this deck, and he allows you to dig for a character. So should you lose Astrid or Civ, which is arguably your 2 strongest characters in this deck, you can quickly get them back in a fight for round 2. Keep in mind that Eric and Magnus are heroic, so even though you do have 2 of those in your deck, you cannot have either one of them out twice on your canvas, so you may have to hold on to one of them in your hand and wait for Eric or Magnus to die to be able to play your next one, or just trade them. Can you see now why I said this is Astrid's objective for power? Yeah, there's loads of objects, it's funny. There are very few locations in this deck, but the ones you do have will help you with your cause. There are 2 Lakringi Holder Totems, which synergizes with your tactic of spamming the canvas with Holder Trolls, as each troll you have out, which as a reminder you can get up to 8 of them out, will give you an extra +1 in the resolve. You also have a couple of Lakringi Forges, which is quite an expensive location, but it allows you to find an object. So if you don't have Eric in your hand, or if it's not worth playing Eric yet because you haven't got an object in your dregs, this location will help you get an object that you want to your hand. As for actions, you have Holder Tail Whip and Samir Smash as your main 2 board clears. Do not waste these on fodder. Use them when you are raising big cards or a lot of cards, otherwise they'll be wasted. Prescribe Rage is another control card you have. This allows you, when played, to attack locations this turn. Try to play this prior to your attack step, when you actually have characters that are ready to attack and locations that are worth attacking that you actually have enough damage to kill. Although that is quite a lot of setup, if you are in that situation, you can wipe your opponent's board of locations, which is brilliant. You also have 1 Lakringi Totem Worship, and this is a really good boost of shards. However, it's very reliant on other factors. It is only really worth playing if you have at least 3 Holder Trolls out, as well as the Holder Totem out. Otherwise, try to hold on to this card or trade it. You have a single Aurium Twine, which allows you to gain some quick shards. However, try to only use this if you have a shard with about 4 shards in your dregs. Otherwise, you're not going to get its full effect. Lastly, you have 2 Imbued in the Forges. This synergizes so well with your horde of objects of power. This allows you to play one for free and then gain +2 for each object out. That does also include the one you've just played for free. Try not to use this until you would have at least 3 objects of power out so that you'll get the most of its effect and actually gain some shards. So that's the synergies and strategies around this deck. Let's have a look at some of the positives and negatives to round this video off. Starting with the positives, firstly, there are loads of cards that give you chroma gain without relying on 1 to 2 cards. What I mean by this is in some decks, they are built to completely synergize and fall flat onto 1 or 2 cards to win the game. Now, although in this deck there are a couple of cards which are much stronger than others, you could technically play a game using this deck and never see Civ and never see Astrid, never see a Holder Totem, and still easily win this game, just thanks to just how much gain there is in this deck. This deck has fantastic second wind potential. And if you haven't heard that phrase before, what I mean by that is that you have lots of cards that allow you to dig and find for characters and objects, meaning that even if you have a really good canvas out and suddenly it gets board wiped by a Samir Smash, it's very easy to then replenish your characters and replenish your objects and get back to a really strong point. It's not the type of deck where as soon as you get wiped once, that's it, it's game over. Next is all of the cards synergize really well, meaning that you're very rarely going to have cards in your hand that don't work together. From my playtesting of this deck so far, I found that you always feel like you've got the best hand. And lastly, it's got very, very strong character potential. Not only have you just got loads of characters with obviously a lot of objects of power to make them strong, when you actually look at it, most of the characters in this deck are 4 shards or more, which is unheard of in decks. So most other decks you play against to play characters are only going to have 1, 2, or 3 shards, meaning your opponents are going to find it very difficult to get characters on the board to outfight yours, meaning you're going to have a very, very strong character-heavy canvas. As for the negatives then, the first one is that you don't have the strongest location control. Now, you don't have nothing, because you do have a couple of your Lakringi catapults, which could potentially erase a location with 2 shards or less. You do have your Holder Tail Whip, and you do have your Samir Smash, and you do have your Prescribe Rage, which, okay, that does sound like quite a lot. But other than that, you don't really have many other ways to erase locations. So if you are playing against a deck that is location heavy, you may struggle. Secondly, there are quite a few cards in this deck that you need to hold on to until the right moment. As we discussed during the synergy, a lot of those cards I said, you don't want to play this until that, you don't want to play that until this, which means that you could be in a situation whereby you have some really cool cards in your hand, but you're just waiting for the right moment to play those cards, and in that kind of stalling situation, your opponent could get really, really strong. And lastly, you have a lack of consistent locations that give you gain. What I mean by this is if your opponent does manage to out-control you in terms of characters on the canvas, so if they do manage to get some really strong characters out early, meaning that you can't play your characters and you're kind of just stuck with all these characters in your hand, you're going to very much struggle to gain any shards because you've not really got many locations that are actually going to give you some shards. So you might be in a situation where just by them having a couple of characters out with 5 or 6 shard cost, you now essentially can't really play anything and you're just stuck. And there we have it. There is my custom deck for the Warriors of Wishwell realm called Astrid's Objective for Power, which hopefully now you can see why I actually think that's quite clever. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I hope that you think this deck is good. Whether you think it's good or not, please tell me what you think in the comments. And if you do end up building this deck and giving it a go, please let me know how it goes, as I'd really appreciate the feedback. If there are any decks that you want to see me try and build, then let me know in the comments. For example, if you're not really a deck builder, but you want to play a custom deck, well, let me know what realm you've got, and maybe what faction or legendary you like the most, and I'll happily build your custom deck, post it in a video, and you can have a little go at it for yourself. Well, thank you very, very much for watching, guys. Again, if you like the video, like, comment, subscribe, it all really helps. If you want to buy these cards, like I said, there is a 10% discount code down below. Until the next time, though, I've been Foul Play Gaming, and as always, stay wholesome.